Ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, welcome to the scrutiny meeting, the scrutiny committee today. Can I ask for any apologies, Brian?
No, there's no apologies, convener.
No, right. Declarations of interest. Anyone wish to record anything? Turning to the minute, pages 3 to 12. It's as I keep on commenting and complimenting that it's a good and lengthy and helpful meeting. A minute. Any comments? No.
None.
Okay, thank you. We'll pass on to rolling action log. A simple rolling action log on this occasion. The main report, which is, of course, is actually on the papers today, and the other reports, the items number 553 and 586, to give their numbers, are both being held over until late next year, next council. So we then, I think, just have to go straight on to agenda item 5 on the Savannah Primary School and Early Learning Centre progress report. And Robert, could we please have your guidance on this report? Thank you.
Thank you, convener. Rona's going to take us through the report.
Thank you, Rona.
Okay, thanks, convener, and nice to see you again, Councillor Patrick.
Thank you.
Haven't seen you for a long time.
No, well, I haven't been anywhere particular, but being a low profile, shall we say.
Okay. So we're pleased to bring this report back, and you have the appendices to go with it, which give you some more detail than the paper does. So what I'll do is take you through and pick out some points of note, and I'm happy to take any questions that you have as we go or at the end, because you might all have different things that you would like to find out a bit more about. So that the paper tells you about the background to Slammanan, so you will all be aware that Slammanan has been in the inspection process since 2018. They had a further inspection, as it tells you, in 4.3 around about 2019, and then they were supposed to have another follow-through inspection, but of course the pandemic hit us and Education Scotland suspended all of their inspections with HMI, so we didn't have that return inspection until November 2021. So in 4.6 it tells you there that we came back as part of their phased return to scrutiny committee and activity. What was really good about this approach was that it was organised with us as officers. So in this new approach to coming back to doing inspections, HMI were very cognisant of the fact that schools had been through the disruption they have because of the pandemic, and they worked really closely with us, particularly my team manager Scott Lavery, who's linked to the school, to plan a really good visit so that people had the best chance to tell their story of improvement and to speak to those who've been involved in that work. So they spoke to staff, to parents, worked with pupils, did some observations and spoke to officers. So the report then takes you back through from 4.7, it tells you when they came in November, and then the next two sections starting at 5 are really trying to separate out the areas for continued progress and development, and we're starting off with the school and areas of progress. Now what I tried to do in the paper was take the points out of the report which kind of mix up the school and the ELC. You'll notice in the HMI Education Scotland appendix that they mix the two up all the time. So in the report I tried to group them so that you had school and then ELC for both sections for improvement. So you'll see there that there were really good points made about the difference in the team ethos. They were complimented particularly about the way the school had pulled together with their community during the pandemic. So we were really pleased to see that the school that had experienced quite a bit of difficulty with community relationships before were able to come together and work together to improve things for children and support families through the pandemic. They did a really good job of their online learning. The head teacher made sure that that was as effective as it could be. They were creative in ways that they could help families transition into nursery. And I think importantly at 5.1.4 there's some really positive statements there about the relationships that the head teacher has led in building, because you'll remember from the last report that leadership was a considerable issue, so credit to the head teacher and the staff team there. What we're really pleased about is the making increasing use of effective intelligence gained from partners. So there's a real improvement in engagement and learning in school, a significant improvement in reducing exclusions, and a significant improvement in their attainment as well. So we are really pleased to report it's not written any of the figures, but I can tell you that their attainment went from being in the 50s for primary 1, 4 and 7 for literacy in 2020, and by 2021 it was sitting at 74 for primary 1, 61% for primary 4 and 61% for primary 7. So even in all of this pandemic, they still managed to work hard together, use their partners and their support, and get children's attainment up for literacy. In numeracy, it was the same. It went from being sitting in the 40s and 50s in terms of percentages for primary 1, 4 and 7 to 83 for primary 1, 70% for primary 4 and 61% for primary 7. So that whole package of supporting learning and working together with partners and those there to help them has really made a difference for children. I think in 5.16 and 5.17, it talks quite positively again. They were recognised the work that they've done about the school ethos, their vision, values and aims, and the staff contribution to that, and the staff coming together as a team to work hard on improving the school. Moving on to 5.2, this picks out the key improvements for the ELCC. So particularly good work there done about self-evaluation in 2019. There were some things said about the ELC needing to do more around about their planning. So we worked very hard with them to do that, and there were significant improvements recognised here. They've taken on quite a number of leadership roles, so that's been really successful in nursery. A great sense of collegiality and moving on practice. And a great deal of improvement in the learning environment for young children in the nursery. It has had modifications because of 1140. It has been expanded. You'll recall that when the first inspection took place, Heathrig Nursery was still in existence, and now the nursery setting is all in Slamana. So I think in there, relationships were highlighted as being really positive, and the high level of child-centred learning that's been developed with the support of the authority. Okay, so taking on to point 6, these are the areas for continued development. Again, they're grouped for the school first and then the ELCC. So I think there's recognition throughout the HMI report in this third follow through that there has been progress made. They did recognise, as you'll see in the concluding statement, that like all schools and settings, the pandemic has significantly disrupted, interrupted and affected the school. However, they have made progress, and these are the areas that are saying they want to continue to see, as do we, that they do more effective strategic leadership of evaluation approaches. So there are good systems introduced, there are good approaches being developed, but it's just being more strategic and keeping sure that self-evaluation of how this is working is moving forward. There have been improvements in learning and teaching. There have been significant improvements in behaviour, significant improvements in the quality of lessons, and what we're all looking for now is that these lessons are even better paced than they currently are at the moment. And that systems and processes, as noted in 6.1.2, are focused on outcomes for children. So there are things in place, but always keeping that eye on what differences this is making for our young people. The next suite from 6.13 down are taking you through things that are better, but needing a bit more work. So again, pace and challenge, as we've said, and that bit of work around about children leading their own learning. So now the school has got children better ready to learn and more engaged in their learning. We're now looking for those children to have a bit more responsibility in taking their learning forward themselves. Professional judgment, and when teachers are asked to give their judgment for how well children are achieving their curriculum for excellence levels, again, that's moving forward. These is better, as I've given you that illustration. Their attainment overall for literacy and numeracy has improved. So it's just making sure that staff are continually looking for the most aspirational achievement of their children. In 6.15, we're thinking here about additional support for needs children. So we're recognising that they are using their partners extremely well, but it's now about making sure that everybody has responsibility for making sure that children in additional support need plans have a say in what happens there, and that they are reviewing these plans with children regularly. In 6.1.6, there's recognition here that professional learning has been developed and is more effective, and that more people are contributing to that and participating in that. And it's just a case now of making sure that when professional learning has been undertaken, that the senior leadership team have an important leading role in all of that, and that it's centred around the school improvement plan, and that development together as a team is then used in their tracking and monitoring. In the ELCC, again, recognising growing confidence of the team, And it's just about making sure that that team keep focusing on a culture of improvement. So the point 6 is picking up the work that we did with the school, so I can tell you a little bit about that. So throughout the pandemic, we kept in touch with the school with a team around the school approach. And that was really helpful in making sure that nothing was lost and no momentum was left behind in terms of the team, and making sure that the head teacher was supported in taking forward the recommendations from the last report. So we had regular visits to the school. The team manager, albeit we were online for most things, did go in. We worked with colleagues from Education Scotland. We asked at the beginning of 2020 if we could have Education Scotland offered support. So we reached out and grabbed it with 2 hands, and we worked very closely with one of the inspectors who'd been part of the inspection team in 2019. She stayed alongside with us, and we worked with the school regularly right the way through, and that inspector was also part of the return visit in November 2021. So that was really helpful for someone to make sure that they could see the journey the school had been on with themselves as an authority, as a school team in themselves, and the work that they had done with Education Scotland colleagues. And that work in supporting the school had all focused around about self-evaluation for improvement and attainment, to try and get really good systems that are now in place and are recognised in this report. And we'll continue to keep that support going, as it says in point 6. So just in terms of the conclusion, it recognises in point 8.1 that, like all schools, there has been good progress. There are still some things to be done, as there always are, and that we will keep working with the school. You'll see that last remark is that in a year's time, the local authority will produce a report for HMI of the progress the school has made, and we are fully confident that when we make that report, there'll be no need for the HMI to come back. So although they say there that should they wish to come back, they will do and they'll inform parents, we are not expecting that that will be the case. So I'm happy to take any questions if you have them now, and where we are with Savannah.
Thank you, Rona. I'm glad to see members of all the questions. I don't know who came up first, but Lorna, could you come in, please?
Yes, I'll come in. It's just to say thank you very much. It's a very detailed step-by-step report, and there's lots of positive improvements. And I note that progress is ongoing as well. However, I'm interested. I've got a question. You know, with the increased use of social media, which has proven to be positive and necessary during periods of lockdown and teacher absences, what mitigations are in place to ensure the child's safety? You mention on page 36 online videos and use of creative social media. And with regard, thinking about the pupils themselves, I want to understand that a little bit better. With regard to pupils' pictures, is parents' approval granted prior to any post? Perhaps that's not done. Perhaps it's only educational material that's used with the social media and online videos. So I just really want that clarified, if you don't mind.
No, not at all. All children give permission, parents give permission for children to be photographed and filmed. And you sometimes see in social media that there might be a wee group of people and one of them might have a smiley face over where the child's face is, and that will be a child whose parents have not given permission for that to happen. And it's the same with videos. So if there are children for assemblies and things like that who are not, then they have ways now of either blurring that child's face or putting a wee sticky over it so that they're not identifiable on any. So yes, permissions are given.
That's good. With regard to the beginning of my question, what mitigations are in place if they're using social media? Obviously, you know, there is websites out there, you know, what is the access that the pupils have, you know, when they're doing online lessons and things like that. So
anything that's used in school, Councillor Brennan, all the apps and all the things that we have access to in our systems, on our iPads, on our PCs, they are all protected and filtered by the authority. So there are protections in place. Now, if children go into Google and type in something, our firewalls are usually very protective. Very occasionally something inappropriate gets through, but that's if they go into Google. The things that we use, the programs that we use, are all tailored and mitigated for the age groups that are using them. So the things that we use in school and the social media platforms that children are using to share with parents and to put their work out there, they are all monitored and protected, and usually our firewalls and mitigations keep them very safe.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Thank you.
Can't hear you, Councillor Patrick.
Unmute, convener.
Sorry, my apologies. I've been coughing so much. I've tried to keep myself muted as much as possible. David Balfour.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just a few questions. I remember this from a while ago, and one of the issues that we were concerned about at the time was the kids that were going to be going over to high school, and to see whether their learning could be accelerated fast enough to get them up to speed for high school. I just wondered if that had been done and how these kids were getting on.
We've done. I couldn't tell you specifically about the Savannah cohort, Councillor Balfour. I could find out for you, but I don't know off the top of my head. But certainly over the last 2 years, particularly, so really since the very first inspection in Savannah in 2018, but certainly in the follow through, that happened, and then the pandemic did. And one of the big focuses for all children, so this is not unique to Slamannan's cohorts going into secondary school, but when we started to produce all of our local guidance to support our schools at the very outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the things that we focused on was transitions. So we provided for the last 2 years papers that guide schools through very good practice and transitions, and that includes making sure that for those children who are coming in with vulnerability or below the achievement level we're hoping there would be, what was going to happen in S1 in terms of that additional support and acceleration and monitoring their progress. So we've also had an increased focus on the broad general education with our secondary schools. So we've been working with them closely for the last 2 years to track and monitor the progress of S1s and 2s, and not so much, trying to build up as much focus on that area of the curriculum as well as the SQA and senior phase attainment. So though I can't answer that question for you specifically about the Slamannan cohort who went in, I could assure you that there has been a real focus on making sure that children going into secondary school, particularly over the last 2 years, have had as much support as they can get, because we recognise that it's been a difficult time for them moving forward.
Okay. If you could maybe get some information on the Slamannan kids, just because it was a bit of a worry at the time, and it'd be good to find that they're getting there, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the next question is, you also mentioned about the attainment, and it has increased. It's very impressive, I've got to say. So just a couple of questions on that. How does that compare with the level they're at now? How does that compare with other schools? And what like the PEF money, what kind of things have they used the PEF money for to help with that?
In terms of their cluster, Councillor Balfour, they're sitting kind of in the middle of attainment for their schools and cluster. In terms of the authority, again, they're kind of in the middle.
Right.
So that, I can also give you when I send you the stuff about the cohort that went through into secondary school, I can also provide you with the clusters, if you like, and the local authority averages for the last 3 years and where Salmannan have sat in that. So that's an easy enough thing to give you, but they've certainly gone from being in the bottom quartile to the middle, which is good.
Right.
Now, it's literacy, of course, is averaged out from reading, writing, listening and talking to an overall literacy score. So we also have data where they sit in all 3 of these areas, and their performance that needs the most work is in reading.
Right.
So we can break it down as an average for literacy, taking all of these areas into consideration, but we also know where they're performing in terms of each individual part of literacy, and the numeracy, of course, is an overall score. So that's easy enough to track. In terms of the PEF money, originally, after the inspections, a lot of investment was given to supporting learning and learning engagement. We've given them some additional staffing from the centre as well, which is about to end in August, but we have kept a deputy head in place and a wee bit of an additional principal teacher time, and that was a real focus on learning and teaching, getting high quality resources into every class. So the pupil equity funding helped us to target learning groups. There was a great deal of money dedicated to community health and wellbeing and working on things with parents and making sure there are activities and events beforehand, of course, for bringing that community together. There have been investments in working with additional support for learning staff. There were some investments in reading resources, and there were some investments in a writing programme. So it's been very much targeted towards learning. Again, I could send you a copy of the school's improvement plan from last year, which gives you the PEF spend plan, if that would be of interest to you. It might be available on their school website, actually, Councillor Belford, if you go in there. So there's a PEF plan for each school that we incorporate into our school improvement plans, and that tells you which schools are going to be focusing their spend on. It might not tell you every detail of where it's gone, but it gives you the headline areas of where they're going to focus their spend on.
Okay, and a final question. As this process has been going forward, has there been any sort of good ideas or best practice or lessons learned that can be used in any other schools?
I think some of the partnership work between the ELC staff and the support that we got in from ourselves and Education Scotland, so that sort of triage of the ELC team, the Education Scotland officer and our central officer working together on that self-evaluation work has been really successful. I think in terms of bringing a cohesive approach with expertise from other places, that would be something that can be modelled up, especially when you're dealing with changes of staff. So you'll know that the Slamanan ELC team has had quite a turnover of people. It's moved venue, it's moved its setting from Heathrig into the school. So that whole process has gone from being really difficult to really effective. So I think we could certainly share that journey there. In terms of the school, I'm not so sure there's a one standout thing just yet. I think they've made good progress generally in becoming a more cohesive team, but that's where they needed to get to. So I wouldn't say that that's something that stands out as better than anywhere else just at the moment, but certainly the approach that we've taken with the ELC team would be something to help other schools who might find themselves in the same situation with really tricky staffing and a change of setting circumstances.
Right, so there's some good evidence and data and whatever to help other schools that might be in a similar situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, that's fantastic. Okay, that's all just now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Unmute, convener.
I'm sorry, I do apologise. Get confused with my roots. Councillor Blackwood, Jim? No. Could we go on to David Grant then, Councillor Grant, please?
Thank you, convener. Good morning, Rona.
Morning.
I think I'd like to thank you for such a positive report and the progress that's been made with your staff. So I'd like to first of all thank you for that and congratulate your staff on my behalf. Page 30, Rona, halfway down when it comes about nurseries, it says that practitioners have limited strategies to support children with barriers to learning and urgently require professional learning in a range of disorders, for example, autism spectrum disorder and English and additional language. Can I ask, Rona, what training that your staff, the teachers, actually get for this? Because we talk an awful lot about the training of the kids, how we're learning, we're kids, etc., the children, but how do the teachers get their training? Do we invest on that?
We do. So we have our staged intervention programme. So that takes staff through different levels of the support they can access as children's needs grow in complexity. And so there's 4 stages of that. And at every one of those stages, there are different training programmes that go in. So as you mentioned there, children with autism. So in particular, our educational psychologist team and some of our specialists from the additional support for learning team, they have programmes on working with children with autism. And that goes from those children who have Asperger's, which is the sort of less severe end of the autistic spectrum, to those children who have very complex autistic needs, some of whom might be in our ASC, which is our autistic specific centres. So there are very specific training programmes in place for autism. We also have programmes in place for helping our children who are having social and emotional difficulties to those children who are struggling to manage their behaviour. There are different training programmes that can be for small groups of staff, or we can go in and do the whole staff if we need to. So we have access to our educational psychologists, our ASN team, to help with training for there. We also work very closely with our speech and language therapy colleagues, and they do a whole lot of programme. One of them is called Focal, which is about whole school communication. So they work with staff teams to make school environments as communication friendly as they can be, and they give strategies which are particularly effective for children with autism. So an example of that would be that, for MD's reference, if you're working with a young person or an adult who has autism, if you want to ask them a question, you say their name first to know the question is for them. So that kind of training gives every member of staff really good strategies for managing children with autism, but they're helpful for all children, of course. But yes, we have very specific training programmes to help our staff.
Thank you, Rona. Thank you, convener. You're on mute, convener.
Sorry, Jim, can you come in?
Yeah, please, convener. And sorry, I'm having connection problems. I'm having to dive out and in. See if we can get through this. It's more a comment than a question. It's actually about the progress the school has made since the poor inspection report in 2018, and particularly over the last 2 years with the constraints that COVID has thrown up. I think the school has made tremendous progress under these constraints, and I would like to offer my congratulations to the head teacher and staff for the progress made so far, and hope it continues. So no real questions.
Oh,
thanks,
well, thank you, Jim. It's a good comment and well deserved to be passed on to all those involved in achieving this progress. One little question I'm going to ask just to clarify my mind. Since the school is now, the early learning is now part of the main school body, are both units under the control of the head teacher?
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. I wasn't quite sure if that was the way it worked in that situation. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm glad that compliments are being passed in view of the progress being made under the circumstances of COVID. Can I ask if there are any other questions to be asked? If not, I would like to thank, obviously, thank you, Rona, for your responses, and also through Robert to compliment the practice and the progress being made throughout the education system in response to a very difficult time. I just hope that despite some issues regarding health, we hear that in actual fact this will be something which will be in the past.
Thank you, convener.
Thank
you.
We'll
certainly pass that on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Brian, have you
yeah, sorry, just in terms of the decision and going back to the meeting prior to this with elected members, in the report it says there's a follow-up inspection, in 18 months. Is that something the committee would want reported back to them? Or obviously it'll be a different committee, but is it something that's
unfortunately I'll not be part of it, but I certainly would. I'm sure that members will wish to be party to any follow-ups, and if you could find some way of putting that into the rolling action log, I think that would be most helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Could I just be, I can't find my hand to put up, convener, I'm sorry.
No, sorry.
No,
my apology.
No, it's okay. Just to be absolutely clear, what it's asking for at the end of this current report is that the local authority writes a report in a year's time, so that would be November 2022, we'll write it this November, and that based on that report, HMI will then decide whether they need to come back or not. So there's not a guaranteed follow-up inspection, so it'll be ourselves that do our visits and our work with them. We will write the follow-up report, which of course will be shared with yourselves, and it will then depend on the outcome of that, whether HMI think that they would need to come back, and that's where I said to you that I'm pretty confident that they would.
Well, thank you, Rona. I certainly share your hope and confidence that in actual fact there will not be any formal follow-up required. I'm sure, however, that committee will actually welcome the opportunity of getting
We'll share the report with you that we
assurance
write.
of the report when it gets to that stage. Thank you very much. Can we then go on to agenda item 6 on the Bowness Public Primary School? Robert or Rona, are you taking that one again?
I am, thank you.
Thank you.
I will apologise to you in advance. I'll do my very best to answer any questions. Obviously, Lisa McCabe is my service manager for ELC, and she's been leading in the work to support the school here. But she and I have worked closely, and I have all the information that you have and some more, so I'll do my very best. But if there's anything that we need to take back to her and respond to you, then that will be absolutely no problem to do that. So just before I start taking you through the paper, a wee bit of background to Bowness Public ELC class. It's under the 11:40 expansion hours. It has a 9 till 3 p.m. every day term time setting. So the children who access Bowness Public ELC come 9 to 3 during term time. So there's different models, as you'll know, so it was important that you knew that. Another caveat over the top of this work is that it's not included any of the details because it's to do with the staff. The deputy head had the remit for strategic management of the nursery, was off for the best part of 9 months. So in that time, and this is all during the pandemic, of course, the senior early years officer had taken on that responsibility. The senior early years officer retires this Friday. So as you'll see in the reports, the overall strategic management of the nursery specifically is now sitting with the head teacher. We are moving a senior early years officer over from Kinneil Primary School this week, and she's going to have a week to hand over with the senior who's retiring, and she will remain there as an experienced person to give the school a bit more support so that there's not any more disruption than needs to be. So it was important that you knew that just before we take ourselves through the paper. So the paper is quite brief because basically the information that you need is sitting in both the report and in the action plan. So you'll see from, if you go straight to 4.3, that in the 2 areas of the care inspection that happened, they were looking at the quality of care and support and the quality of management and leadership. So quality of care and support was the area adequate, which is why we're talking to you today about what we've done about that. And the other area of quality management leadership came out as good. So as it explains to you in the paper between 4.4, there was a number of strengths. We'll pick some things out of there in a moment from the report. And there were areas, 2 recommendations made. So there were no requirements. These were recommendations. So one around about additional support needs, which forms the biggest part of the action plan, and one about promoting children's well-being and them having more to do with choosing their play and their learning. So in the considerations, it's just that we always would like to bring to you our plans to support any school that has an evaluation of adequate, because in Falkirk Council we were always aspiring for more than that. And the work sets out what we've done. And the conclusion in point 6 is basically saying that what people told us tells you there that there have been people who have been asked about the service, so that included parents, it included children, it included staff in the consultation. And then if we go to the conclusion for this one, there's no requirements, which means that there's no, apart from the action plan which we're required to give, there is no legal requirement made. And the appendix 2, which is the action plan, is the work that we're currently doing, and we've been trusted by a care inspector to take that work forward. We are expecting that care inspector will do a return visit, probably around about September, perhaps this year. So we are busy working with the school to make sure that we're ready for that, because they could come back anytime between September and December 2022 with their current inspections. So if I could just take you through the action plan, you'll see from, which is appendix 2, you'll see that many of the actions here have focused on the recommendations areas of additional support needs and the fact that there needs to be a greater responsibility of all staff for looking at children's plans and how they manage different needs of children coming into the nursery. For a few bits of clarification, the abbreviations of SEYO is Senior Early Years Officer, and an EYO is an Early Years Officer. You might not know what a pedagogue is. A pedagogue is an early years practitioner. It was a Scottish Government initiative. Some local authorities call them excellence and equity leads. We decided to call ours pedagogues because what we really focus on is the very good practice of learning in early years and how that is delivered. So that's why they're called pedagogues, but they're really there to support excellence and equity, and these posts are Scottish Government funded. So you'll see from the start off that immediately following this inspection, things were put in place right away in terms of staff development. We have things that are available in existence as part of the early learning rolling programme of training. So just to go back to training available to staff, we always have a rolling programme of training for staff in all of our sectors that sits on CPD Manager, which is our online learning facility. And that's where you can book courses. Some of them are online modules, other ones are a chance to come to group meetings or training. You'll appreciate that until very recently, all of that was happening online. So that's what CPD Manager provides. You'll see that the pedagogue is working specifically on coaching. So that's helping the staff there to work and interact with children and develop really good skills in supporting their play, extending their play and having good conversations with them and asking children's interests and helping children to be involved in their planning. They have an additional support in from the ASN teachers, so there's going to be somebody coming from the ASN team to work very specifically with the whole staff team to help them get even better at planning for children who've got additional support needs and strategies for settling those children who are having difficulty. Where it says in the evidence and evaluation column at the end of that first section of the improvement plan, QA stands for quality assurance, and that quality assurance is undertaken by the school team, the head teacher, the deputy head teacher, and now the senior in the nursery, but it will also be undertaken by ourselves as central officers. So Lisa McCabe's early learning team will be working alongside, as we have done with Savannah, to make sure that progress and that quality assurance is done together and that we're keeping an eye on the progress that we want to see happening. In the next section of the action plan, you'll see that the timescale for the work that we started was immediate. So all of the things that were in the report about, particularly around about the things for mitigating transmission of COVID, for cleanliness, they have all been addressed immediately and sorted, so they are no longer an issue. Other things there about action planning being accessible for all staff, that's immediate, but what we're not doing here is doing something that's a one-off, so you can see that it says immediate and ongoing. So as with Slamanan, Bowness Public ELC will continue to receive our support right the way through to the next inspection, and we'll be following up. One of our quality assurance jobs is all these things that we've put in place that are happening right now, training and support and extra input. We will then go back and make sure that there has been an impact of that it's not just been forgotten about, that we're going in and making sure that these practices are embedded and ongoing. The important part in this particular section is round on the left-hand side about realising the ambition. So it's making sure that the staff team are absolutely using that national guidance that we have, and realising the ambition is an excellent document. It's very helpful. It incrementally takes people through what they should be doing. So we're going to make sure that that is the core document that staff are revisiting and reflecting on as they take forward the processes that we're putting in place with them just now. In the very last section, it's about making sure, as I've said, that the pace of improvement is increased and maintained. So we are absolutely confident, as we are with Slamanan, that we've already sorted many of the things picked up in the inspection report, but we're going to make sure as we move forward that this is maintained and that there'll be no possible opportunity for anything to languish or to go back the way, to use an old-fashioned term. And obviously, we'll have to make sure that this new team, as the senior retires, that this newly established senior leadership team work very well, and that's why there's things in there about supporting the leadership team. So I hope that that gives you a sense of the points that were picked out in the report. Many of them very positive, as you will see, because the leadership of the setting was seen to be good, which we agree with. So the things that were picked up in the improvements, many of them operational, some of them to do with additional support needs. The action plan tells you how we've taken that work forward immediately, and will do so further on. So hope that's helpful.
Yes, thank you, Rona. Thank you for that helpful report. Lorna, question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you again, Rona, for the report, actually. And I was really pleased with the action plan there. There's a lot of items in that for improvement. That's really great. Thought about quite a lot. I really just want to pick up on something on page 5. Obviously, we all know that a young person's emotional health is very important, as how they travel through their school life and things like that. And it does say there, children find it difficult to cope with the emotion and upset. A few children, by the way, and you ask the team to be more productive and support the children's emotional well-being. So my question is, what specialised training and mitigations are put in place to support the teacher? I know you talk about training, but I would imagine this sort of training is slightly different. You know, for the teachers themselves to be aware and identify a young person's emotional needs. So it was just really to get an idea of the specific specialised type of training you have in place for teachers.
So in our ELC settings now, the only teachers that we have are those teachers who are part of the central team, Councillor Binney, so they're our sort of peripatetic outreach teachers. In ELC settings themselves, it will be early years officers, early years assistants, who are the ones who we brought in under 1140 hours expansion to cover those extended lunch times and children being in nursery for longer to help with outdoor play and supervision. And then there are senior early years officers, and in some of the bigger settings, there might be principal early years officers as well. So teachers are part of that picture from the central team, but actually we tend to call them practitioners, and that covers all of these different posts. And the ELC team have a highly comprehensive programme of support and training for those practitioners, and that ranges from how well to interact with children, so how to have good conversations with them, how to, as I said, extend their play and play alongside them, how to observe them really effectively to see how well they're managing, either in their own individual play or with other children, how their relationships are forming. We have an early years framework now, which gives practitioners a real, very robust framework, and that's about developmental skills. So it's helping people to see, is the child developmentally where they should be? Are we able to plan the activities around about those children that will help them to reach these developmental milestones as they move through? And is that going to help them manage the curriculum as they move further through the early level? On top of all that, we have very bespoke training, which is particularly around about nurture, about emotional intelligence, about working with children who are distressed, about working with children who are coming from really complex family circumstances and who might need a slightly different day to the other children because things are a bit tricky at that time. We have a very good system now where we have a panel of people from central teams who work in that, includes social work, ourselves, our speech and language therapist friends, our friends from educational psychology, and when there are children coming through the system in early learning who are having difficulty, who are not managing or coping, we can work alongside the nursery team to say, right, what package of support can we put in here that's very specific to that young person? And it might be an increased amount of time in nursery. It might be if they're before nursery age, we get children coming to us through two-year-olds. If they're going to be vulnerable, can we get them into nursery a little bit quicker to help them? So it's such a huge spectrum of support we can give, Councillor, and it's hard to explain. But certainly there's, now that we know there were staff having difficulty there, that emotional intelligence, that interaction with children, that giving comfort and care, that's been a very big part of the work that was done in the in-service days quickly after the inspection. So that's all underway.
Yeah, and I'm really pleased to hear you give specific support to children, the ones that actually need it the most. Thank you.
You're on mute, convener.
David, thank you.
Thanks, convener. Yeah, just a few points. I was going to ask about the training, but you covered that quite well. That was quite interesting. If we go on to page 2 of the report, it mentions where are we now? It mentions that there's a small outside area that the kids play in. I just wondered if there was any plans to make that larger, or if there is actually space available to make that larger.
Are you familiar with Bonus Public School, Councillor Balfour?
No.
it is the most unusual of buildings. It has started off as a very traditional Victorian school.
Right.
And it's over the years had many annexes and extensions and bits added on. So when you go into the school, it's a bit like Harry Potter. You're in different levels and different corridors and all sorts. It has also got the steepest, slopiest, concreted playground you've ever seen. It's not a school I like to visit in the winter time, I can tell you, because trying to get from the entrance down to the front door is like a slalom. It's quite steep. So they've done lots of modifications in trying to improve all that. And the nursery area is probably one of the easier bits. And it's been, obviously, they've done their very best to give them as big a space as they can. So at the moment, no, there are no plans to extend it. So, but the space that they do have has soft pour, you know, it's safe and it's well laid out and well used. So no plans to extend it at the moment.
I'll go on to why I'd asked that. A while ago, I was involved with one of the schools in my area. They had a very small area for kids playing, and they could only get a few out at a time, like 4 or 5 at a time. At that time, we had a wee bit of a fight to get that, but we eventually got that extended by quite a bit, and it made a massive improvement. One of the other schools as well, they actually increased their play area as well, and what they did was they had a raised beds put in. I was actually one of the people went in making them up. It was quite good fun. And what they did was they had the kids planting stuff, growing it, looking after it, harvesting it, and then making things like soup and things like that. It was very, very impressive. They actually won the award. They had a Scottish Government minister come in as well. No.
Yeah.
No, my area.
Oh, bus.
No.
Well, because they've won awards. Bintassen's won awards.
Yeah.
Beancliffe won awards.
Yeah. Bowhouse.
Bowhouse.
Bowhouse won an award.
They got their innovation awards, didn't they? The ELC innovation awards.
Yeah. The work they were doing there with the kids was just phenomenal. So it'd be good to see that maybe rolled out elsewhere. I'm sure other schools do that now.
They do.
But it was a very, very good thing to see. So.
And I think, you know, that the credit to the team who have worked on all the new settings that we've built, that's been taken into consideration. It's one of the biggest considerations of all of the schools who had new builds or refurbishments or extensions. The outdoor area has been given just as much importance as the indoor area, because what we're looking for, as you rightly say, is that free flow of being able to go outside and inside whenever you want to. So Bowness Public is not restrictive in terms of its size. It's not so small that the children can't enjoy it. It is in the flatter bit of the school, so it's not in that big steep hill. And they have done some really innovative things to make it the best space that they can. So it's not an issue. It's just maybe not as big as some of the newer ones, but it's not restrictive.
Okay. Thanks for that.
You're on mute again, convener.
I can see that mute jar getting filled up.
I do apologise for my inability to decide whether I'm on mute or not. I'm trying, if possible, to stifle as many coughs and splutters by going into mute, but I'm getting myself gloriously confused, for which I do apologise. The report includes the comment regarding inspection grading. I think the decision to give adequate for the quality of care and support, I think, has now been covered and explained, and I'm glad that things are being put already into action there. I was very pleased, and I would imagine that it will give particular satisfaction to the departing leader head, who I understand is about to retire, that in actual fact the quality of management and leadership has been given good, which is encouraging both for her and also, I may say, for all the rest of the participating staff. I have no actual further questions, but I'm glad that this report, and I'm also glad to note that there will be further reporting on this. I wouldn't imagine that necessarily will merit putting into our action log as such. But if there is any further reporting from the inspectorate, perhaps the Scrutiny Committee in the future will be given the opportunity for a report and to be informed of the continuing progress, which I'm no doubt will be the case. Does any member wish to make any further comments? If not, we simply have to note the situation, note the progress being made here, and thank both Rona and also Robert, of course, for the opportunity to review this one and possibly remove this from the list of outstanding items which would be for consideration. I would simply at this point draw the meeting to a close. In more ways than one, in my case, I would like to take this last opportunity to thank everyone, of course, Brian, for steering us through all the meetings we've had, and thank my fellow councillors particularly for the particular interest and in detailed interest, in fact, they've been showing in the future of all the items coming under scrutiny, and perhaps most appropriately when it comes to the education matters, which is, of course, our complete priority concern at all times, particularly as a result of the COVID difficulties, which I've already paid credit to have been well tackled and surmounted. Thank you all very much for this, and I'd like to wish you all very well. May I say, where appropriate in May, and in the case of Councillor Councillor David, I'm not trying to get rid of you, I do apologise. Councillor Blackwood, and I also wish you very well. Thank you for a particularly interested contribution in the past to scrutiny. Thank you all very much. And
thank you.
Rona, thank you very much for all your help. And Robert, for continued support throughout education. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener.